Good morning and welcome to Business Perspective. We have an exciting show ahead of us, Carlo, right?
Yes,
Lots of
certainly.
topics to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And some topics that I think are very interesting, maybe close to my heart. And I think a lot of Belizeans, we're looking at, well, later with our guests, now we're looking at some data issues, some legislation that could be very important for Belizeans and for getting business done, in this new age, especially with the COVID situation, and then we have some great guests as well, two great Expo to You guests in the food industry that maybe some Belizeans are not completely aware of, which is good. We're also talking about buying Belize. So we have some great guests there. And, me and you are going to kind of chat it up right now as well about some other stuff, right?
Right, exactly. Just for a quick review again, as Carlo has mentioned, we're going to start with our first segment here, where we have a couple topics we do want to discuss. But coming up as well in today's show, we're going to be talking with the team from EDC about e-governance. And where we are, as Carlo mentioned, this is even more significant in this new normal or COVID times, as we sometimes say. And then in our third segment, we also have two Expo to You presenters. This is our third Expo to You show, and those two presenters will be Nalido Belize and Mahogany Chocolate as well. As he mentioned, that's it's food industry stuff, so that's always good. Food in the morning, bright and early, get us
Yeah,
energized. All right.
definitely.
So as Ernesto was so kind to introduce us. My name is Katherine Meighan, and
Carlo Habet, with you guys representing the Chamber of Commerce. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys, talk about business. And I guess with that, I'll let you take it away and start to engage the audience, Kathy.
well, I am going to be asking you questions, and I'm going to be leaving you to answer them.
Well,
Primarily.
certainly. Of course. Well, I'm here for that.
That's the role of the host, right? As they say. So
Yeah.
I have there's been a couple things that, well, you and I did some prep yesterday, but one of the things that we do want to highlight before we get into our second topic and move to our second segment is this idea of a debate, this conversation about the
Yeah.
debate leaders. And I think we have an opportunity to mention and to start the conversation about what we've been planning. So I know, just to add to that, we is in these COVID times, it's really hard and it's unsafe, from a health perspective, to be following the regular political
Mhm.
process. But time is not waiting for anyone. And with that in mind, as persons interested, from specifically talking about us and our topic today, which is the business perspective, it's very important that we give our potential leaders an opportunity to discuss and provide their um, opinions and also the actions that they are going to be taking to handle these many components of our community, of our society, of our country, that needs to be addressed, specifically talking about economic matters and sustainability, so to say, right? Sustainable development, which is a word that we all are familiar with and recognize how important that those two words are. And so, with that said, we partnered with Love, also with Galen University and us at the BCCI, and we are working hard in the background to plan a debate. And we anticipate that the promotion for that is going to be starting full fledged later on this week into early next week. So we encourage our viewers to look out for more information on that. Formal communications have gone out, and this is something that I think is new to Belize. and something that is needed, in my personal opinion, and also something that will, assist them and assist us, as the Belizean populace, in understanding what these leaders will bring to the plate, so to say. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And thanks for taking a lead on that. I think it's important for us, as a business community, because I think so many things come back to the economy. Um, and I think it may sound obvious to us, but I feel in a way too, and if I may be so brash, I think that the political landscape needs to level up. I look at so many other countries, first world countries, even regional countries, and so many of them. The debate is such a standard thing. The policies are so important. I feel, unfortunately, due to I don't know if this is the nature of the youth of our country or for whatever reason, but I just feel like we have not, unfortunately, elevated ourselves to policy talk. In all these 30 plus years of our independence, it comes kind of late, and too many times I think that the race devolves, into sort of like mudslinging, and it's more about voting somebody out than voting somebody in. So I think it's really important for Belizeans, and the youth, because we're a very young country. A large swath of our population is under 30, the voting population, as well, obviously. And I think that this new generation, we are ready for more. Like, we want to see more. We want more from our leaders, and really, as a people, it's up to us to demand that. And I think I'm always I'm always proud of the chamber. Really, I mean, I'm a part of it now, but even when I'm not, for taking the lead, on these sort of issues, I think that we have one of the more, I would say, productive, business sectors. No pun intended. But we're actually, I mean, we're out there. We're very active, and I think it makes a lot of sense because, again, everything comes back to the economy. And if we don't have a thriving economy, if we don't have jobs for our people, money to put in their pockets to then kind of like recirculate, we're not doing well. I think an interesting side effect of the COVID phenomenon, the pandemic, is that it's kind of forcing us as a country to look within, and I guess that's doing that with a lot of countries. And I think that what we're noticing is that we as a people, we have enough, we have enough as a people to grow. We have to kind of like put that, kind of like get that impetus to sort of drive ourselves forward. And I think that's there. And, I think that now it's really up to the government and the next government, to kind of take that to another level and to kind of give us an enabling environment. And I think that's something that we've always been saying, is that we don't expect too much from our government, in the sense that I feel like as a private sector, it's always up to us to drive the economy, right? I mean, that's really our job. And that will always be the case, that entrepreneurs, corporations, we will always drive the economy. That's our job. We create jobs, create wealth for our people, but at the same time, the government has to have an enabling environment. And I think, rightly so, and I think that later with the EDC, and I'm sure that they will kind of get into this, is that they're looking very seriously at a lot of these kind of hot button topics to kind of enable a better business environment. Right now it's not the easiest environment to do business in, and I mean that's a fact. And Belize, we're competing with a lot of other nations. It's not just about us. You know what I mean? Before this, we were exporting money to Chatham, exporting money to the U.S. and other places. That's what I call it, because we're just sending our money over there for goods and services that we could have gotten here a lot of the time. So now it's about keeping it in. And I think that if we could do that, we could still see a lot of growth even in this challenging time.
Right. You said two very important points that I want to point at again, and the fact that this COVID has forced us in so many ways, and I think the word force is appropriate, to look at all these angles of our society or economy that need urgent improvement. And as you said, it also speaks to you know to put in Belize first in so many ways, right? And remembering the importance of how our community works and how our economy works, right? you giving to one means you receiving back at some time in the near future or in the far future, but at some point it does work like a circle. It's a cycle, as they say, right? So that's an essential part indeed. You said the policy talk, right? And you are 100% right, and I agree with you that we need to talk policy a lot more. And we need to remember that the decisions of now are going to affect us into the short term, the middle term, and the long term. And it's so important as a young country, as you said before, for us to make the right decisions and for us to build. It's what we talk about within our families. It's so important of how you raise your kids, of who they will become in the future and their drive and their ambition, all of these good words. So I think that, you touched on several very important points, and, bringing it back to the debate real quickly, this is an opportunity for us to, all safely understand what is being put forward. And we're in a, I won't say unique, but more unique situation where our current prime minister is not moving forward. So whomever takes up that prime ministerial role is going to be new to the position, right? Um, and and so right, we also don't have a previous prime minister coming potentially vying for the seat. So even more reason why we as a community, as Belizeans, need to clearly understand what will they be putting forward.
Yeah, and I think not just clearly understand, but I think that we need to clearly demand what we want.
Right.
And I think as a people, it's up to us to understand where we are, where we've come from, and where we want to go. And I know that sounds probably very inspirational, but I find it to be a situation, not just in Belize, but in general, and we're speaking about younger generations. I think sometimes we don't have enough appreciation for the past and for the struggles that we've had to kind of endure to be where we are today. And so it's really tough to know where we want to go. I think a lot of us in a way are lost, and I don't want to, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but we need to kind of figure out what we want, and I think when we figure out what we want, we can then demand that. And I think if we demand that, the political parties will have to kind of follow suit, because what are they here for? They're here to serve us. Let's not forget, everybody, that these people, the government, they're public servants. They're here for us. We are we're actually their bosses. Unfortunately, that's not how it was perceived, and people feel like they're at the mercy of politicians. But no, and at this juncture, a year like this, this is the time when we can say, look, we're going to put you in this position. This is a job interview, actually. I think someone had mentioned that before too, on the show. This is essentially a job interview. And we're going to bring up all these guys and say, hey, do we want you in this job? Can you handle yourself? And I think we need that. We need the debates, because we need to know how these guys think, and we need to know how they can respond to these things, in real time. Too many times, they're left behind some door, and then they have, someone else, some CEO, someone else representing them, things like that. But we want to know who will be serving us. I think that is valid concern. You know what I mean? And I truly hope that they step up to the plate, and take that challenge very seriously.
Right. They're like the captain of our ship, right?
Yeah.
And we know we are in, we're in stormy waters, as they say, with COVID, right? And this is a waters that are more stormy than they normally are, so to say, right? So a category whatever, if you want to say it in terms of hurricane terms. But I don't even want to name a number.
Yeah, I know.
But yes, I think that's very important, and it's important that, as we've said, that we allow and give an opportunity for all of them in a safe fashion to communicate their thoughts on the way forward, as it is essential. Before we, I know we have a few minutes before we run into the second segment, but I do wanna talk a little bit about business continuity, right? And make mention to the resources that the chamber has to offer to all businesses, but in particular SMEs, and small medium enterprises, and remind our listeners that there are these tools and these resources that they can reference via the chamber. And of course, they're available to our members, and we communicate to our members in various fashions. But they're also on our website, which means they're also available to those who are not necessarily members of the chamber. And we want you to become members of the chamber, of course. But these are opportunities and these are resources that we understand are important to the business community at large. So we have them there available. William, can I ask you to please pull up the website for us? Let's give him a second there. But basically, what it is, as we give him an opportunity to do so, you can visit our website at www.belize.org. And on that website, there is a specific category or section window for COVID-related news, right? And there's also a resource that references business continuity, and on there are resources from the ILO, the International Labor Organization, and there's also resources for training as well. You could simply tap on the search bar up to the top of the up at the top of the website, or you can also reference it by simply looking around. The upcoming training is going to be on learning the online components of how to from the Social Security. This is important to most or all businesses, right, including the self-employed that have decided to become to register with Social Security as well. Thank you very much, William. So we encourage you to look out for that. We also have our social, and just before we get into that, the next training is on the 8th of October. We also encourage you to reference our Facebook page. Their Facebook page link, William, you have that there if you have time. If not, then they can always simply search it on Facebook. And the Facebook page also offers resources and updated information on what is available to the public in terms of identifying resources. Right now, there are certain sectors of our business community that have not been able to open due to health concerns from COVID. But most certainly, this is an opportunity for those businesses to start to think about how will we open and how will we open safely, and utilizing the resources there can assist you in doing so, and might also, give the relevant authorities further confidence that you as a business entity is ready to open, and us as a sector of the business community is ready to open as well. So we encourage you to reference those resources. There is quite a bit. It's very extensive, but you can pick and choose via the table of contents what particular sections you want to reference, and take some time to review. And the training as well, take some time to, this is the downtime for some, this is in the middle of the rush for others. Either way, there's an opportunity for us to learn about all these new components. Another exciting training I remember is teaching persons how to get their products online, right? We have resources, and that's somewhat next with our upcoming segment, right? And we'll elaborate there about how do you get online is one component, but how do we ensure that e-transaction, so to say, right, can be carried out safely and can also be carried out in an efficient way as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about what's happening at EDC in preparation for that. But these are resources that we definitely encourage you all to utilize. Any thoughts there, or anything to share, Carlo? Thank you, William.
Yeah, no, you're right on the button there. And thanks for being so actually very thorough, because I think sometimes on the street and people would say, oh well, yeah, I know you're in a chamber. What is the chamber doing? And they would often say things like, I think the chamber should do more. And I said, well, I think you need to kind of see what the chamber is doing first before you deciding to do more. But honestly, the chamber is actually quite an organization. We have quite a secretariat. quite a board, a lot of committees, and there's really so much going on in the background, so many discussions at any one time. Um, it's just that sometimes change can come a little bit slowly when you're dealing with actors across like, multiple, government, non-government entities, talking about private sector as well, So, I mean, it's a lot, but I'm glad that you actually plugged the site. I think the site is very informational on our social media. Actually, there's a lot going on there too. A lot of emails we also send out with updates, things like that. And I think sometimes, just being real here, sometimes people can get a little bit of email fatigue. I know it happens to me sometimes too, but I make it a point to still check everything. You will not be left out of the loop. I think that's one thing I actually really do value about the chamber membership is that you'll always know what's going on. I always feel like I'm more plugged in when I'm paying attention to the chamber. And again, talking about the economy, everything was back to the economy. There's a lot of government information, a lot of things that are happening, upcoming legislation. We always ask you for your opinions. And actually, one thing we don't get enough of is your opinion. So I like to use this time in general to say that, please touch base with us by email, by social media, any way you see fit. But we really want to hear from you. And it's, without your input, we can never have the most complete snapshot of, what's going on or what we need to be doing, right? So kind of talking like earlier about the debate too, we also need to hear from our constituents, which are the business people, which are our members. And we have a lot of flexible packages. They start very low. And I think at this point in the year is winding down, we're actually offering like half off. So it's not too late to join. I mean, again, there's so much at your fingertips. And we're here, a phone call away, an email away if you're not sure what's going on. This great Expo to You segment is another great initiative that we have also started in response to the fact that we can't have an expo. So we're thinking on our feet. We're trying to bring value to our members and to the public at large. And actually, we have to go on a break very soon, but I wanted to just touch on one thing that's kind of off topic, but you mentioned it earlier about the cyclical nature of an economy. And I was having a discussion with a friend of mine the other day, and I said, it's interesting because money is like energy, right? Obviously, it can be created and destroyed by the central bank, but when it's out, it just changes hands, right? And it's interesting the way $1 can end up giving value to dozens and dozens of people, and it really doesn't make any real sense, but it works, right? And I think if we can learn to buy Belize, essentially buy in Belize, promote our own products, enjoy our own products, we will see that as a country we can grow, because again, I'm telling you, we're exporting our money. Now that we can keep it here, if we can buy our own food, make our own products, we as a country, we can grow. And the way that Chetama looks, that could be us, because that's our money, So I wanted to just kind of mention that now that we have the power to develop our own country, but we have to make this decision consciously, pretty much every day. You know what I mean? And if there's things that we can't get in Belize, of course, sometimes we can't get everything in Belize, but whatever we can, we really have to look seriously at it, and we really have to make the effort. And I think businesses in Belize also have to continue to step their game up. I think with social media nowadays, I'm seeing a lot more businesses than I used to see, personally, and I'm very happy for that. And the more things I see on social media, I follow them, I save them, and if I need something, I try to go back to them, But there's so many things and so many artisanal style products. I mean, these are things that, in other countries, they're a premium, and we can get them for very reasonable prices. Here in Belize, by real people that we know that need them, and they put their heart into it, you know what I mean? So I think we have a very talented populace, and I think that we need to kind of support these people.
I agree with you very much, but I'm thinking we pick this back up on our third segment. Thank you very much. I know we need to go for a break, and we'll be back in the next few minutes. All right. And welcome back to the Business Perspective. Today is 29th of September 2020, and we will be talking to the team from the EDC. We have 3 members of their team with us today. Let me just quickly do an introduction. We have Mr. Ishmael Quiroz, Executive Director for EDC. We also have Wayne Snider. He sits as an advisor in the Ministry of Finance on taxation and compliance matters. And we have with us Tira Greene. She is the legal drafting consultant. Specifically, today we will be talking about the topic of e-governance. So any starting words, Carlo, before we get into our presentation from these folks from EDC?
Well, I'm very excited to hear more actually, and I know these guys have a lot in store for us. I was reviewing some of the material. Um, it's just very interesting. So I actually won't say much. I actually want to hear, and then I guess you can ask some questions, about how this affects the business environment here, how it may actually help to also, instill some confidence in foreigners doing business in Belize as well. But yeah, I'm very interested. I'm all ears at this point, so I'll let them get to it.
Perfect, right. And I think it's very important to reiterate that at the start of this conversation, how important this legislation really is moving forward to e-commerce alongside e-governance. So I'm also very much looking forward to our conversation to see where we are going and what does this really mean and how will this really impact our business community. Ishmael, you wanna take the lead here in terms of introducing us to the topic and talking specifically about the benefits of what this will, what, and give us a little bit of background as well in terms of what this will offer to us.
Great, thank you so much, Kathy and Carlo. This is a fantastic opportunity to highlight some of what the EDC has been supporting in the context of e-government. We have spoken quite a bit in past about the topic of digitizing government services on the show. But here we have an update of successful progress, and we're very happy to discuss that. I reflect on what Carlo mentioned just before the break about us needing the input and feedback from especially the business community on some of these very important things that come on the table for discussion. And so one of the things I think is also needed is information out there, breaking it down. And so we certainly aim to keep it as non-technical as possible by showcasing some real life examples and practical examples of how this affects Belize, how this affects businesses here on the ground. And so what we have really is a package, or the beginnings of a package of legislation that aims to modernize what Belize has in its legal framework to enable simplification, to enable speed and efficiency in the way that government delivers its services to the business community. That's important. And so with that said, what we're proposing to discuss today is just a quick overview of a very interesting initiative and a very important approach as I hope to highlight as we discuss it a bit more. So basically the idea is to discuss, some examples of how modern digital oriented legislation can enable business to happen.
Perfect. Is there, I know we have a slide set that you had presented. Would you like us to pull up that at the moment so we can go over some critical points and
yes.
allow students an ability to also see that important information on the screen as well?
Correct. So just by way of very quick background, the specific project that we're talking about is entitled Leveraging Digital Technology for Improving the Business Climate in Belize. This is an IDB-funded initiative, or Compete Caribbean IDB-funded initiative that seeks to process re-engineer. So it looks to simplify the delivery of a government service, specifically the company's registry, right? At this point in time, it's all manual, paper-based, and the idea is to, why not offer that online? Actually, it's important to offer it online so that somebody can submit their application and perhaps track the progress of their application and basically get a much faster turnaround. And so that's the overarching objective. And if we go to the second slide, we have a specific consultancy or a component that entails a legal drafting consultancy that looks at key legislation that either needs to be updated or written to enable some of what we're proposing to happen. And this is where the expertise of Tira Greene has been instrumental in really making sure that, and again, what I think Wayne will also highlight is that this is the beginning of ensuring that we have modern legislation in place to enable some of these things to happen. And so the objective has been to really ensure that we have that modern key legislation. In the past, we've spoken about e-government initiatives, and in the pre-COVID years, what we've had is a lot of discussion and a lot of effort made towards digitizing government services. But what COVID has really revealed is how urgent it is for government to transition to perhaps being fully digital. So also offering the services that they do via digital platforms. One of the stumbling blocks, though, is that there has been missing key legislation to enable certain things to happen. And so where we have come in is really insisting on having the legislative framework being updated. And that is what this project and this consultancy specifically speaks to. If we move on to the third slide, I highlight the 3 specific pieces of legislation that Tira has provided support on updating or drafting to incorporate and modernize what we have on the books. And so we very importantly needed to update our Electronic Transactions Act, which already existed in Belize and enabled certain things to happen, but we wanted provisions for digital signatures to be included, and that was achieved via an amendment in early August that Cabinet approved and the House approved. But we do have a more comprehensive update to that act, which will enable further things to happen. And we also have now in draft form, a public sector data sharing bill, as well as a data sharing protection bill that is still in the draft. And so ultimately this at some point, hopefully soon, needs to be tabled at Cabinet and approved by the House. And it's very important to say that regardless of, and in terms of time frame, while we would want this to happen very quickly, it does need to go through a process. And perhaps it does make sense to do things in more of a package. And so we do have some key things on the books. And in a nutshell, those are the key highlights of the consultancy. And I'm pretty sure that my colleagues will be able to expound on it.
Right, sure. Is there anything to add, Wayne or Tira, to what Ishmael just mentioned? I know Carlo and I have quite a number of questions here, but let's give you a chance to add to Ishmael's introduction before we move forward.
Tira, okay, please go first.
Thank you very much. I just want to add that this is not a unique initiative of Belize. Everyone, particularly in light of the pandemic, is now moving forward to upgrade, because digital government and digital business is the way that you have to operate now if we are to survive, if businesses are to stay in business, and if persons are to retain jobs, and there must be some economic activity. And this is the first package, is actually the key laws that have been identified in pre-phase of this process, as well as in the phases when we look through. There will be other things that need to come on, such as revision of electronic evidence, electronic funds transfers, but these are the most key pieces of legislation that would at least give you a kickstart in being able to do most transactions. Okay.
The only thing that has come out good from the pandemic is that worldwide countries realize the need to work away from paper, to have things digital, to be able to work from home. And while we had already started, we've talked before on the show about the registry, the domestic registry, the international registry. We've been working on that from the perspective of digitizing it and making it online so that people can actually just do it from their home or come to the office, as opposed to having to come to Belmopan. So these pieces of legislation are needed whether we're just doing the electronic registry or we're getting into Social Security or tax, whatever else. And it's the foundation. Everybody wants it right away, but it's like, you get a new car, but you don't know how to drive it. So you have to get these rules in place first, because without an electronic signature, anything that you try to do that's not paper-based doesn't have a legal effect. So that we're still moving forward, and I think the registries, the online registry for domestic and international is sort of the first thing that was on the list, but it is just basically going to be the poster child for all the other things that have to happen. The legislation is based in a way that it's not geared towards registry or tax or social security. The legislation is there so that any ministry can say, I now have the power to do this, so how can I use electronic commerce, digitization to do things in my ministry better? Okay.
Right. And I think that's, you know, that's a very good way of summing up this introduction, because it's important to remember, as you all are saying, that the legal component or the legal aspects which governs the regulatory component and the security for both the clients and the vendor, so to say, is critical, right? You need to have that framework in place, and by doing that puts us in the right on the right path, right? There's more work to do, of course, and we understand that it's a process, but it's most important that these things are underway, and it's important that we're taking this time to make this happen, right? I think it's important to highlight, and you touched on a point that is relevant to me, and I'll ask a few more questions down the road on that, but the work from home aspect, right? How does this change for a company that seeks to hire employees, for instance, or independent contractors who work from home? What does this really mean? The mere fact that you said that legalizes that digital signature, so to say, is a critical part of this process. Maybe we can, you know, we've talked about the fact that it's going to be beneficial to ministries, and by being beneficial to ministries, it means that it'll be beneficial to us in the private sector that connects with ministries. Example, when you are registering a company for the first time, can you all give us any examples of how this will change in terms of not only the efficiency but the time frame of getting that process going, and perhaps even the cost as well?
The ministries, certainly between the two registries, the work that we're doing with the domestic and the international, that's basically standard in most jurisdictions, where you can incorporate online, you can do a name search, whatever else. Within the international side, we've had some of that where you can email, you can send stuff in and transfer documents online. But the domestic, and everybody certainly is well aware that there's been a public cry to try to automate that. There's been a lot of issues. It's all paper-based, and the first part of it is that people they want it right away. The trouble is there's probably 18,000 files, paper files, at the domestic registry, which all have to be digitized, right? They have to be scanned, corrected, and put on before you can do anything online. Now the Ministry of Finance, I guess about 4 or 5 weeks ago, took over responsibility for both registries. The intent is to merge them into one. Again, it's a one-stop shop approach. And even in the timeline of the last 6 weeks, we're at a point where they have put an email system in place, so that basically citizens can send stuff in electronically to get it started and sent back. And there was a lot of pushback that there's going to be some issue with that. But quite frankly, I was talking to the deputy registrar last night. Already, the villages are sending stuff in. From Punta Gorda to Orange Walk, they're sending it on email. They don't have to drive into Belmopan to get that done. So what's coming down the road with this electronic registry is that ideally within probably the end of October, there'll be more services that will be put online. The intent is to also put it in Spanish. And then basically, as we merge the two registries, you'll be able to have the ability to do anything on the international or domestic side. The only thing you can reinforce to people is that domestically at this point in time, Belizeans have to be patient. You can't take a rusted old car and turn it into a Ferrari overnight. So that these things are going to come. They're going to come in bits and bytes, and at that point, people will look down the road in 6 months or whatever from now, and everything will be unloaded, and you'll have something that will be, it'll be getting to the point where it's competitive with other jurisdictions.
Cool. Touching on this idea of information, because I know that actually Ishmael had mentioned this earlier, and information right now is the most valuable commodity in the world. Without information, we can't make decisions. And I know personally from my experience in business, in real estate especially too, and specifically with companies registry, a lot of foreigners want to know, well, can I set up a company online? And the answer is usually no. Now, I think it's going to be a big boon to business. But at the same time, I was kind of curious about, and I've always kind of thought this, but I don't know how it works in practice. I'm kind of curious as to how automated this can be, because I think another problem too with doing business in Belize is just bureaucracy. And a lot of times it's at like the lower levels. Do you think that by having these systems online and eventually getting them automated, would this kind of cut out the gatekeepers, so to speak, and make business more streamlined, whereby someone that says, I have a business I want to start, and I'm going to fulfill all these requirements, A, B, C, D, E, and once the system knows that I fulfill them, I will simply open my company. I don't have to wait for somebody to take the paper off of one side of their desk and then sign it and put it on the other side. And if this person is sick or on vacation, I can't get this done. Is that really the end goal, to automate it? Because I think that would be really the great equalizer for business.
If I can just, begin by saying that, yes, the intention is to fully automate, but also to fully convince everyone that it is something that is safe, secure, possible, and legal. During the consultation phase of the draft legislation that Tira prepared, because consultation is very critical, as I mentioned, a very interesting question came up. I was like, well, how do we actually convince people, especially in the public sector, that something is allowed, that something is correct and legal? And that's a fair enough question, because you do want to be doing your job correctly. You don't want to get into trouble. But as a matter of fact, as Tira can confirm, there's a lot that even our existing legislation already enables in the context of electronic transactions. And as a matter of fact, Belize was the first Caribbean country to enact Electronic Transactions Act quite a number of years ago. But how much have we done with it? And so while on the one hand, you do have the problem of gatekeepers, a root of that may also be that there is a lack of confidence in being sure that it is safe, that it is correct. And so we have to dispel that, and we do that by explaining the laws, confirming what something allows or doesn't allow. And I think maybe Tira can kind of give some examples of that, or clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Ishmael. Yes, this is an issue that has come up in all the Caribbean countries, all the CARICOM countries have Electronic Transactions Act in force now, except for Guyana. And it is very interesting because I've been working in this area for over 15 years. And in many countries, people in various ministries are not aware that there's actually Electronic Transactions Act and what it does. And this came to fore mostly during the past few months, as persons need to do transactions electronically ever more urgently. So your existing act implements the UNCITRAL model law, which is basically based on the Convention on E-commerce, which is the accepted standard worldwide for e-commerce. So because of course you're not just doing e-commerce or digital government within Belize, you're doing it with your regional and international partners as well. So all the standards have to be harmonized and interoperable. So you do have the functional equivalents under the current legislation, paper and electronic documents or signatures or records are functionally equivalent. So the company's registry as of today can conduct its business electronically or digitally. There is no legal barrier to that. Electronic signatures are currently legal in Belize, and with the new amendment that was passed in August, we have introduced the concept of digital signatures, which was not really concretized at the time that Belize passed its Electronic Transactions Act. So there's a distinction between an electronic signature, which can be anything from a scan to email sign-off to a fingerprint. And then we have digital signatures, which is like your more advanced signature, which would use PKI technology, or one of the most popular things being used is DocuSign by Adobe. So this actually, even though it was still legal under ETA, the new amendments actually shows a distinction. And then when the government is doing its providing its services, there are some documents that would require that a digital signature is used, such as, like, say, a deed or wills or statutory oaths. And of course, there are other documents that will not require that signature, like your simple filing company documents and routine company documents, not special ones that may require an affidavit or digital signature, but routine filing, change of directors, filing for an application, a change of name. So right now, what we have with the amendments do actually allow for these things, not just in companies, but almost any agency. An important thing to understand about the Electronic Transactions Act is that it's an omnibus act. And if you look at it and if you look at the amendments done, it applies to all the laws of Belize except for the exceptions. And in the new law, we are removing the exceptions, and we can talk about that later. So whether it's a company's registry, whether it's agriculture, whether it's food and drugs, whether it's the a single window for trade, whether it's Ministry of Finance, it applies to all these various transactions. So even if your law is talking about paper documents, that act actually supersedes it.
Thank you. Folks, we need to take a quick break. It's the 7:30 hour, so we'll be back after these commercial break.
And we're back.
Hey, and we're back. Okay, so as we were talking very quickly in the break, we want to, bring this home for our viewers and make sure that everybody can connect, because we all have our own experiences. But some of the examples that we spoke about in the break are important and relevant to all of us. So Ishmael, maybe you can give us some sort of insight on, how this legal framework underway is going to benefit us on all these aspects of the everyday transactions that is happening between private sector and public sector. There's a number of examples that I can think about. Maybe you can identify a few of those.
Yes, as both Tira and Wayne alluded to previously, what these pieces of legislation do, because they're not confined to just, in this case, the benefiting the company's registry process, they're going to enable all sorts of other agencies and services, as well as the private sector, to engage more and more in e-commerce and in digital activity, digital transactions, essentially. And that's great news. I think it's great news for business, because we've all had the experience of having to stand in line for a permit or a license, or having paperwork lost when applying for a plethora of things that we depend on the government to provide. And so this certainly opens the door for agencies right across government to now run with it and deliver, right, via online, via digital means. And so yes, you're looking at paying taxes, you're looking at applying for different licenses and having systems speak to each other. I think, in opening up a bank account is very problematic because, central bank doesn't, speak to the Ministry of Finance or something like that. And so we certainly want to address those things and have the everyday transaction or interaction with government be improved.
Right, and this can also play a role, for instance, with birth certificates and passports down the road as well, right? With applying online, right?
Yeah.
As well, we the because of the change in because we have our government head, so to say, in Belmopan and our commerce head in Belize, there is a cost of and time cost as well of moving between Belize and Belmopan. Right, and for business persons, that's a expensive cost. So
well,
to say,
I mean, it's an issue for everyday citizen. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday that had to call a ministry from the city and had to call a ministry in Belmopan and wanted to know what was owing on his account. And they said, well, you have to come in. And he goes, what, I'm going to drive all the way in, spend $100 on gas to find out I owe $80. Like, this is insane. And so, but it's not the fault of anybody in the ministry. It's just that's the way it works when it's paper-based and in person. And the difference, you had made a comment before, Carlo, is that your computer doesn't have a personality. It's not neutral. It doesn't get sick, although it seems to get sick every time you want to do something. But so this isn't. E-government is not about, you want efficiencies, but it's not about getting rid of the public sector. It's about just doing things more efficiently. And yes, as the country grows and there's more and more files and there's more and more things, you either find ways to do it more efficiently through technology as opposed to just adding more bodies, in the back offices to do it. The benefit and the government's, basically modus operandi for this thing is service. And as the private sector, private sector embraces all these things because they see specifically, it makes my life easier. It may not save me any more money, but it makes my life easier. It's faster, it's more efficient. I can do it once. I mean, I remember getting my work permit, and I had to go through 3 ministries in Belmopan, and then you get into one ministry and you take the form to one, and then you got to get into another line to go pay because the person who does the form can't do the paying, and then the third person stamps your passport. That's nobody's fault other than that's how the manual processes work. Your computer doesn't have 3 people in there. It works and gets it done, so you can do all that stuff. So it's good for the people in the public sector. It's great for people in the private sector. And what COVID has done is forced the need that you just can't shut a country down for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, months. You need to keep operating. And it isn't so much about work from home, for employees, whether it's in government or in industry. It's more about being still able to do things, whether it's a hurricane or it's a COVID or it's a statutory holiday, these things can still get done.
Certainly. And I think to further what you're saying, it's really about working from anywhere, and people can also invest in our country and do business in our country from another place. And even, locals, if there's somewhere else they can get something done, which, as you mentioned, it's quite painstaking as it is. And I think you raised, and I don't want to throw too much blame at the people in the government, but as you said, it's really, in a sense, it's a communication issue. But once you have the technology, it communicates on its own. And then there's no one that you have to call, and everything is automated. And that's what I was getting out with automation is that I know people, for instance, like with Baja, getting permits, a lot of times it's the same process over and over again. And sometimes I think you said there might not be potential cost savings, but I think if you're saving time, you're saving money because time is money. But I guess my point was more that if I am bringing in the same product that I brought in like 2 months ago, and all I have to do is fill in 5 lines, why must I wait for someone to stamp that when all I have to do is fill out a form and that's there? And then, if at some point they want to come and audit me, they can, but every single transaction doesn't have to go,
in front of someone, and then that also puts this kind of corruption element in there too, which if you take the person out of it, it becomes more transparent, and I think that also instills more confidence, locally and internationally.
Yeah. To your point, Carlo, as a matter of fact, when something goes onto a digital, goes through a digital process, there's that much, it's that easier to audit as opposed to then having to rifle through papers, and things like that. Things get lost. And certainly securities need to be put in place, or protocols for record keeping and things like that. But it again underlines the point why this thing needs to be done in a holistic way, and making sure that all the legislations are updated and lined up.
One of the things that is critical around, there's all the positives, but there's other things in the background that have to happen. The legislation which we're talking about is the footprint. It's the foundation upon, one of the things in the foundation upon which you build. There's going to be technology costs, because all of this stuff for the government and for people, you're going to need to have computers. You're going to need to have fast enough bandwidth and broad enough bandwidth so that everybody can do it from wherever in the country. And it's not in Belize, it's everywhere. These are the same issues. The other issue is all of this that we're doing now lays out the framework. What every country has or realizes it needs to have is it needs to have a coordinated effort on how to do this. And as we were working through the legislation, we were finding draft legislation sitting on desks in different ministries that have been there for years, quite frankly, because one minister thought that it would be really good to do something like this, but it never got past the ministry. The new Prime Minister of Japan literally just has now created a minister of e-government. Okay, right. And I think it's the same kind of thing. Yes, we're going to have this omnibus bill to do this, but we can't have 20 ministries going out. The starting gun goes off and they're all rushing to do something. The country has to put some focus on: is it better to deal with a permit for Baja to do something, or is it better to do tax? Where's the best use of resources in the short time? So you need to have senior level coordination, someone at the cabinet who says this is what we're doing, right from the prime minister down, and they allocate the resources and the time for the country to migrate these services out. It just can't be every minister going off and I'm going to have the best ministry in Belize, because everybody's going to want that. Right.
Yeah. And completely. That makes a lot of sense, and I understand that is the next step. I have a one quick question for Tira, and then we can get into the public service component of it, or sector, excuse me. Tira, could you tell us a little bit more about how this will be beneficial for e-commerce? And give us an example or two of how this will help, for instance, maybe SMEs in terms of them being able to market their products and sell their products online as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, apart from being used by the public sector, the new laws and regulations, particularly the amendments to the Electronic Transactions Act, or the new Electronic Transactions Act, as well as the Data Protection and Privacy Act, creates the rules that are harmonized both at regional and national level for the private sector's use as well. So things like contracting, Belize will have the latest rules on electronic contracting, on the basic rules of consumer protection when carrying out business online, the basic rules of using the cloud computing. So all the rules that apply to the public sector apply equally to the private sector. And then there will be some recourse, for instance, for things like slander, or whenever there's a crime committed online, there will be a recourse for takedown of such notices, of such matters that are posted on social media. We've seen people posting all sorts of things on social media. Or there's also the cybercrime legislation coming in, but the this new legislation also works with that because they're all interrelated. So that would be a benefit to them. But very briefly, coming back to what both Carlo and Wayne was last speaking about in terms of they coming together, the various ministries, one of the benefits for the private sector as well would be when you can have single windows. So for instance, Trinidad and Tobago has the largest trade single window in the English-speaking Caribbean. It's called the TT Bizlink system, and many ministries are attached to it, are connected. It's not perfect. There's still work ongoing, and even on the legal and regulatory framework, as well as updates. There are over 150 services offered and numerous agencies, and since its inception, there has been over 2 million transactions done on the system. So can you imagine the efficiency and cost savings to the both public and private sector, and if you have a system like that in Belize?
Certainly,
right.
It's exciting.
Right. So it's, it will introduce or encourage further ease of business, but also protect the end users as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you.
You had asked, and I think it's a sort of segue around data protection. That was the other part of the bill that was in a draft form. One of the things is people are wondering about, well, who's going to have this information, my private information, whatever. But to expand on our conversation about a one-stop shop, being able to do one thing in one place, that means that the ministries are going to have to share information. Okay, because if I need a work permit, it's got to come from Social Security, it's got to come from immigration, it's got to come from whatever. So the data sharing and data protection is to allow the ministries to share the required information. It's not just open up a Pandora's box of everything about you. They get access to what's appropriate for their ministry. So, the trade-off is if you want to do one-stop shopping, you've got to allow these other ministries to have that access. And one of the things that certainly was felt important to the government is that if we're going to come forward with these bills right now, let's get all three, because one covers the other. So that what we're going to have with these three that are in close to final form, and then the other ones, funds transfer and electronic evidence, is that basically, in a month or so, with a new month or two, we don't know the date, when we have a new administration, there'll be this package of a turnkey package of legislation for the next government, next administration to move out with e-government.
Right, and just the description of all that you're saying, it reinforces what you said before, that there needs to be a captain of the ship. There needs to be some component or some individual that's connecting all of these ministries and figuring out the sort of information they have to share and where the privacy concerns are and the data protection components as well. So well said. Thank you very much for that.
I think you made a good point too about, I guess, the fact that if you're sharing this information, it actually helps government because there's less leakage, as we like to say, right? But if multiple agencies have to talk to each other, tax agencies, for instance, which I guess now they already kind of fuse them into another tax service, multiple agencies have to talk. You have no records that are corroborating business, and if one is missing somewhere and it's somewhere else, then something went wrong. So actually, it helps the government, I guess, to kind of bring in more revenue and to kind of catch people who are, doing the wrong thing.
Well, just because you open a domestic company doesn't mean automatically you're going to walk over to tax and file for GST and business tax.
Exactly.
You're supposed to pay it, but you're working legally with your corporation and nobody even knows it exists.
Yep. And it happens a lot. So
yeah.
It's a great move, yeah. And it's a paradigm shift, like you said, and like Kathy was alluding to, is that people, I think in Belize we've been a little bit late to catch up. Private sector as well, it's not just public, but I find that people have taken a while to invest in IT infrastructure, and there's a case that has to be made. And then also, the education has to kind of catch up with, people that are coming in, experts and so forth. And, as you can see, we're still importing certain exports in certain areas, importing certain experts in certain areas. But, I'm glad to see finally that there is that shift. And I think if government can lead the way is going to show the private sector that, hey, we have to invest in this too. We can no longer, let's say, just be satisfied with the few little free services we have, but we need to start paying for subscription models and start, putting money into like servers and having an IT person too at our business, because it's really the way to do business now going forward.
Yeah.
Very good point, Carlo. You mentioned IT infrastructure, but IT expertise is definitely something that's lacking and much needed. And our education system and the private sector does also play a role there, also needs to catch up and fill that void or preempt and have, opportunities in place for, qualified people, from the region and from Belize to actually be available. The point on data, government will benefit quite a lot by, using or capturing data and using it in a more strategic way. And this is something that specifically the public sector sharing bill, it makes a recommendation that an Office of Data Analytics be established, as well as the creation of a Minister for Digital Government, as Wayne mentioned, because that one central guide or captain is definitely needed to make sure that everything moves in a synchronized way. And so some of these things are taken into consideration, and they're there for when the next administration comes in and is able to run with it.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I know I kind of took away from the next point. We don't have much time left, but I think we're looking at the open data aspect of our data sharing. I actually was curious, and I know Ishmael, me and you have been part of some open government, which is another step conversations. How much does this lay the groundwork for a true open government framework?
I would say that it's definitely it definitely opens up that opportunity, as we've said, the interoperability, the data sharing, it really enables some of these things to happen to begin with, but then it also makes it legal and people have confidence in it. And if the public sector has confidence in it, then it could be truly open government.
Right. Well, this has been quite an interesting and enlightening conversation, but we only have a few minutes here, and so I'd like to give you all some parting words here. Ishmael, I know you referenced that you did want to summarize with the last couple slides from your slide set, so it's all yours.
Yeah, well, by way of overarching goal, I think it's important to just say that the idea is to create efficiencies via the legal framework, or have that work to create efficiencies, and simply having modernized legislation will go a long way in helping us to deliver on e-government commitments. Perhaps just the final slide, which is on next steps. We do have these draft bills, which then needs to be tabled at cabinet and then passed at the House. But as mentioned right at the top, these are, for all intents and purposes, phase one, right, of making sure that we have updated modern legislation. And there are other areas that need to be revised, updated as well. And so we certainly look forward to having all of this in place so that we can truly move forward on e-government.
Well, good luck with this. I can see that there's been several steps and a lot of background work, a lot of hard work happening. And as you said, there's more steps to come, but we're on that path. And COVID has highlighted how significant it is that we head on that path, and we do so in a timely manner, right? As Wayne mentioned, this is not a process that can be rushed. But doing it in a timely manner nonetheless is also significant, as these are things that are essential for all of us, especially at this moment, as we all identify ways for efficiency, but also protecting ourselves from the health component as well. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye-bye.
It's been very enlightening.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.